So we'll have a record of this. All right, I see it's about 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. This is Mels 603 for March 14th. There's my dog. She's got to come in and see me. This is week 9. Zoom session week 9. Let's see, somebody's buzzing in. I think we're okay though. All right, we're good. This week we're going to cover exceptional children's programs, including intervention. And I will distinguish between the two of those in a few minutes. So as always, let's go to our new share, our weekly schedule. Look at that. Again, this is week 9, the principal's role in special education services, Principal's Guide, Chapter 7. Your discussion boards for this week were 7 and 7A, attend an IEP meeting. That was 7, and then 7A was interview the chair of the member of your school intervention team. This is the school-based committee that receives referrals from teachers concerning students that are having academic or behavioral problems. Outline the official 90-day process, and whether or not your school employs a 3-tier intervention system prior to starting the official 90-day process. And I will delve right into that. Your evidence artifacts, you should be started on the skip by now, and you should have just completed the OMA. If you have completed the OMA, please be sure that you go to Dr. Stedman's internship shell and drop it in OMA evaluation Dropbox, and then under Dropbox go to final evidence narrative for the Turnitin check for originality report. Please remember, you will not get that report. Dr. Stedman will get it, and he will respond back when you're ready to submit it. So let me run through that process with you quickly. All right, let me get out of that. New share. And I'm going to go back to my desktop. Minimize that. All right, so what you will do is when it's completed and you have all 4 tasks put together in your final evidence narrative, you will go to My Courses and you will find Dr. Stedman's clinical internship box or shell. You will scroll down to OMA evaluation Dropbox. You will open that up and you will see that the last one is for the OMA final evidence narrative that has all 4 of your tasks in it. When you click on that, you will be able to upload your document. Now, you will not get the report. Dr. Stedman will get the report. And if it's less than 55, everything is good. If not, he'll be able to see what you need to fix, and he will direct you in that endeavor. Now, once he clears that, what you will do is you will go to this same shell and you will look up My Grades. Now, if you don't have My Grades here in your menu, do not panic. You can find them, or you can put My Grades on your menu. So I'm going to show you how to do both of those. If you just want to go the long way around, just simply go to Tools, open up Tools, and My Grades can be found under Tools. It's just that easy. And when you open it up, it will tell you what's been graded in Blackboard. You can do that for anything. All right. And when you click on the one for your Turnitin, it'll say 100, submit to task tree. Now, if you don't want to have to do that each time, what you can do is come over here to your menu and click on the see where the little plus sign is there, and scroll down to Tool Link, and you can simply type in My Grades, and then in the box underneath, find My Grades, make it available to yourself, and submit it. And when you do that, guess what? My Grades will now be over here on your menu. where all you'll have to do is click on the button rather than go to Tools and then click on My Grades. And you can move it up and down and put it where you want it. You can put it up at the top so that when you go, that way you can see what anything that's been graded in your intern shell, and you can do the same thing in your class shell. If My Grades is not on your menu there, and you can find out your grades for anything that you've turned in either in your class or an internship shell. So you can go to Tools and then go to My Grades, or you can move My Grades over here to your menu so you'll have a direct link to that. And then you can move it up or down as to where you would like to have it once you get it over here. So that's just a little quick and easy way. So make sure that when you get your final OMA ready, you go to your internship shell for Dr. Stedman, put it in under OMA evaluation Dropbox, and then final evidence narrative, and he will grade it. And that's the way that works. Okay, again, you should be finishing up your OMA now and be moving into the skip. I've already covered the skip. Next week, I'll cover the skip again. I'll go over it again. I went over it last time, so I will cover it again next week. I want you to get started on it, and I'll cover it again. All right, so that's where you should be with your evidence artifact work. Now, let's go back. Let's go back to our weekly schedule. And let's look at this. All right, now, attend an IEP meeting. And the notion there, and it says it in discussion board, is to try to figure out who runs the meeting. How does it work? What happens during the meeting? You need to be aware of that. Many of you, I'm sure, have been to IEP meetings because you had a student who had an IEP, but if you haven't, this is going to be an eye-opener for you. But what I want you to look more than the content of what happens is the process. Who leads the process? Who's in charge? How does the process flow? What role does the school have? What role does the LEA representative have? What role does the parent have? How does that process play out? You need to see who's in charge and how it works out. Now, understanding, if something goes wrong in an IEP meeting, you have your EC staff, and they're the people that puts that together and are in charge of that. And if something goes wrong, that comes back to your district EC staff. Now, I also ask you this week to interview the chair of your intervention team. Now, it may go by any myriad of names at your school. I've heard care team, SBC, SST, intervention team, student services team. Doesn't matter. What I need for you to understand the difference in that and the IEP process is that intervention team is what the state refers to, the state, not Dale, the state refers to that as a school-based committee. Now, what that means is, that's very significant legally. If something goes wrong during that process, that comes back to the principal's door, not to the EC department. That comes back to the principal's door because it's a school-based committee. Now, once a child is referred for behavior or academic problems, they get the same protections as, as an EC child while they're in that process. But what you need to understand is that process is dependent upon you as the school administrator. Now, what that means is once that referral comes in from a teacher, now the EC teacher will be on that committee usually, but they're just there as a reference. They're not in charge. The school staff is responsible to make sure that all the laws and policies of the intervention process are upheld. And if they're not, it's going to come back to you as the principal. For example, when they're referred, does your district have an MTSS process that precedes the 90-day intervention process? If they do, you need to know what that is and make sure that that's being carried out. I've told you the story of response to intervention. I went and the school was not actually implementing those lessons, those reteaching lessons. That's on the principal. So You need to find out what that process might be. Now, under tonight's tab for week 9, I had put in there for you the one from Cumberland County that basically outlined their multi-tiered system of support that precedes the 90-day official process of 30 days of interventions, 30 days of anecdotals where you're observing and collecting data on the kid, then 30 days of the first level of intervention, and then an assessment and either a different intervention or more of those interventions for another 30 days. And at the end of that 90 days, a decision is made as to whether to test that kid for exceptional children's services. That's official. That has to be in there. That's federal law. Prior to that, your district has local board policy that stems from state law that says that you need an intervention program like multi-tiered intervention or response to intervention before the 90 days occurs. You need to find out what that is for your district. Let me see what this question is. Should we do a 504 and IEP? I had an AP in charge of 504, special teacher in charge of the child's caseload. It's a good idea to do a 504 meeting as well, but it will follow the same process as an IEP meeting. Let me say that again. The 504 meeting will follow the same process as an IEP, but that would be a good idea to visit one of those and see what's going on there. That's from David. That's a good question. But the biggest thing that you need to understand as an administrator, according to what district you're in, is that you are responsible to make this process happen, not the EC department. The intervention process is directed by the school. It's a school-based committee. Now, let me give you a bad example here. Let me mute this. Okay. In the summer of 2014, it was August in 2014. You can Google it, Charlotte Observer. August 2014, 14 principals in Charlotte-Mecklenburg in elementary school were either demoted, retired, or removed right before school started. And everybody was like, what in the world has happened? Well, it was very simple. They weren't monitoring the intervention process. Again, it's this principal's responsibility to monitor that process. And what was happening is African-American males were being referred to the intervention team. Not only were they not going through RTI or MTSS, they weren't even going through the 90-day required federal process, intervention process before EC testing. And some of those students were being, within 30 days of their referral, were being tested for exceptional children's services. And of course, an abnormally large number of African-American males were being placed in EC programs. They did not have MTSS, they didn't have RTI, they weren't going through the 90-day legal process that the federal government put in place for them as a protection. They weren't going through those. Now, the principals all said, we didn't know. We thought the EC teacher was, no, the EC teacher is not in charge of that. Your intervention team process, MTSS, RTI, and the 90-day intervention team is all through the school's intervention team, which again, to be redundant, is a school-based committee. That's what the state designates it as. Regardless of what you call it at your school, it's an SBC, a school-based committee. That means if it goes wrong, that comes back to your doorstep as a principal. Usually, there's bad things that happens to an assistant principal if they were in charge of that as well. So please remember that if that process doesn't get followed and somebody files a lawsuit, it's going to come back to your doorstep as a principal, not to the EC department. So you need to know what that process is in your district. You need to see how a 504 meeting runs, how an IEP meeting runs. You need to make sure you know how your intervention process runs, whether you're using MTSS or RTI. But then that the 90-day process, the federal process, is picked up after the MTSS or RTI process is run. As I said, I have a synopsis of what you could be looking for. This one's from Cumberland County. In Cumberland County, they use RTI system, and it speaks to the tiers and all the different things that go on, and it tells everybody's role. And even the author said, "Ooh, that's a lot. Thanks for reading." But you should read through this. Your district may be different than this, but you need to know this is the basic process, whether it's RTI or MTSS. This is the basic process of intervention. This occurs before the 90-day process starts, or it may funnel into. So now some districts have 180-day, they do 90 days of this prior to the official 90 days, so that the child has 180 days, has has a reasonable chance through interventions to avoid that EC testing. Now, if they need it, they need it, but you may find out once we've been putting kids through this process, a whole lot less kids are being tested for exceptional children's services. But you don't want to be the place that 2 weeks after a kid's been referred, he gets tested for EC services. That won't go well for you. Just ask those 14 former Charlotte-Mecklenburg principals how it went for them. And you can't claim, "Oh, I didn't know," because the state clearly designates this as an SBC, school-based committee, that the responsibility lies at the principal's doorstep. So please make sure that you understand. You've got 3 different processes here. You've got IEP, 504, and the intervention. The intervention process has multiple steps in it, whether it's RTI, MTSS, and the 90 days. You need to become intimately familiar with all of those for your own safety. All right, let me close that. We've covered that one. I can close it now. Come on, you can do it. We've covered where we are with evidence artifacts. Again, you're finishing up OMA due and task stream at the end of week 8. That was last week. You should be moving into the SCIP. Again, I will cover the SCIP again next week according to the schedule. If you remember, I covered it week before last, but I will cover it again. I will cover the SCIP again next week. You should be moving into that as we speak. Let me close that one. All right. Okay. All right. So now, the first thing I want to get into tonight is some of the resources that are available out there to you. So let me move this out of the way. The first one that I want to show you is this one. Department of Public Instruction in North Carolina has a website, and they have one in South Carolina too. I'm sorry I didn't have time to pull it up tonight. I was coming on 2 wheels trying to get here on time tonight, but I'm sure that Dee has seen it before. There is one that looks just like this in South Carolina's Department of Public Instruction, and it has who the director is, the assistant director. It has a strategic plan, and it has a lot of different resources here that guide you through what kids are supposed to get and how it's supposed to work at your school. You can spend some time with this. They have all kinds of conferences, PDs, webinars. Oh my goodness. This is a plethora of information that you can access, but parents can can get in here too, and so they become very educated. So you don't need to come unarmed to an IEP or 504 meeting. You need to make sure that you've gone through all these things, and just like this policy, policies governing services for children with disabilities, you should have gone through all of these things. You need to make sure that you know what you're talking about because parents definitely will. In addition to this website, there's also a website specifically for parents, and this is run by folks who are advocates for exceptional children. and it basically summarizes the process for parents. This is a good one for you. Now, this is also available in a booklet form. I've seen it in a booklet form, and a lot of you, I think Emily has mentioned to me that when parents come to events at the school, they actually have these pamphlets available for them. This is the website that goes along with those parent resources, and as you can see, they've got it bulleted here so that you can pull these things up, virtually online and see all these things. But this is the parent resource handbook here, basically. So this is a good website as well for you to get more information and understand. The 10 basic steps in special education, key terms to know, parental rights under IDEA, parental participation. It has everything. It has all about an IEP, addressing behavioral interventions. All that stuff is here on the parent website. That's on our page for tonight. Also tonight are the FERPA guidelines. These are federal guidelines, so I have covered federal, state, and local already tonight. So here's federal. Federal guidelines. Now, FERPA is specifically about privacy rights. Access to educational records. Well, this is the one you better study closely, making sure that you're handling documents and information correctly, and understanding that teachers can't sit at the lunchroom table out in the public forum and talk about a kid's services or complain about an IEP or a manifestation and termination. You and your staff needs to be well versed in FERPA law. This is for all 50 states. You need to make sure you understand the federal guidelines for privacy. This is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It outlines what rights parents have and what privacy measures that they are entitled to. So you better go over this one with a fine-tooth comb. All right. I can close that one. I've already gone over that one. All right. I hope you can see this on the screen. This is Gen's 10. Now, what I have here on the screen, a few years back, I had a lady in my class who was a EC director for a district not far from here, and I had her put this together for me. I said, what's the 10 most important things to know? So tell me what we should know. If I'm teaching this and to students in 603, tell me what 10 things that they need to be aware of. And so here they are. 10 million children live with special needs. That was 12 years ago. That number has doubled since then. The point there is it's not going away. We are moving away from self-contained units within schools and self-contained schools. We're moving more to the inclusion model, leaving kids in classes. I've got a PowerPoint tonight that's inclusion versus mainstreaming. When they're talking about mainstreaming, what they're talking about is having kids in their own class. Inclusion model is putting them in regular classes and not having just exceptional children's classes. But the point here that Jim wanted to make is this is not going away. This is something that's going to be a part of your daily life in the school business from now on. You should know about Public Law 74-192, which is Education of Handicapped Children from 1975, specifically that document. Look at page 305. But this is Public Law, was it 94-142? Yeah, it's 94. Public Law 94-142 is the one you need to look at. That's what started the modern era for exceptional children. Now, you folks hopefully aren't as old as me. Hopefully you'll get as old as me, though. Understanding that the modern era for exceptional children didn't start until 75. I was out of school by then. Um, and so none of this was going on when I was in school. But I can tell you there's a world of difference about what goes on today and what went on during my career, because this kicked in as my career was starting in the business. And so it was very foreign to me because that was not my experience in schooling. And many of us, one of the things that we're trying to do is train you the right way to do things, and not have you rely on what your experiences were when you were in school, or your experiences as a teacher, what you're experiencing now. But we want you to know the way it should be, not the way that it was or the way that it is now, but the way it should be when you get in charge. So for me, it was a steep learning curve, because I had never observed any of these things, because those kids didn't come to school with us. And so they were in separate facilities. That is no longer the case. You folks probably went to school after this time, and so it's not abnormal to you. But just following the law and making sure that you understand the law is the bigger issue for you. It was a cultural change for me, and hopefully it's not for you. Understand least restrictive environment, and that's why we've gone to the inclusion model now, to try to move more kids to their least restrictive environment. Understand that these kids have civil rights. That's that parent handbook. That's all that federal documentation on FERPA. That's their civil rights. Again, civil rights means the FERPA handbook and that parent handbook. That's their civil rights. That's those two documents. IDEA, individuals with disabilities. That's when we started including 504 kids. Understand that. They were included in that as well. So 504 kids get the same protections as EC children. IDEA does free and appropriate education. Evaluations only take place to the extent it helps with student placements and services to be provided. That's why we do RTI and MTSS. We don't want to evaluate kids any more than we have to. IEP is developed for each student. You all know that, or a 504 plan for every 504 kid. And then the last one, and that's why I had you to go and kind of see what was going on in an IEP meeting. Both students and parents are encouraged to hold an active role in decision-making process for the student's IEP. So these are things that are just reminders for you. These are things that it's easy to forget. These are things that we don't often acknowledge. So I want you to make sure that you understand that these are the hot spots. These are the areas where you're going to have the biggest kickback on you. IDEA, you're not providing the same thing for a 504 kid as you do the EC kids. You're not having the kid in the least restrictive environment. You're not encouraging parents to participate and students to participate in their IEP. You're over evaluating kids in terms of your testing before you put them through the intervention process. You're not following the civil rights, which is the parent handbook and FERPA guidelines. Those are the hotspot areas for you. I think I've covered everything except for my PowerPoint. I'm going to cover that now. Now, I have to move that out of the way. Okay. All right. So here is a PowerPoint. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, inclusion is the inclusion model, where EC kids are mixed within regular education classes. Mainstreaming, for the point of this discussion, is that kids are mainstreamed into your building, but then they're held in classes with only special ed kids. some people have a problem with that terminology, but let's make sure that we understand inclusion is that we don't have special education classes, we have special education kids in regular education classes. Mainstreaming would mean that they would not be held in a separate facility, but they would be in our building, but they would be in classes of their own, special education classes. And so here's kind of the difference between those two philosophies. Excuse me. All right. Okay, for mainstreaming, they have separate classrooms, and they might get mainstreamed into a regular classroom at some point, but their home classroom that they work out of is a EC classroom. That's what mainstreaming is. Inclusion is they're in the regular classroom with learning assistants. And so this program focuses on preparation for adult independence. So that's the biggie in between the two of these. Separate classroom, but regular ed in some classes for their IEP versus they're in regular classes all day. That's the difference between mainstreaming and inclusion. Some people have this notion that mainstreaming means, well, we've been doing that all. No, mainstreaming is they only got out for certain classes, and for special ed classes. Inclusion means there is no special ed class. That's the fundamental difference between the two. So if somebody asks you, you now know. In an inclusion model, the regular classroom teacher and intervention inclusion teacher work cooperatively within the regular classroom. And the EC teacher collaborates with the regular classroom teacher to develop and implement cooperatively a broad range of learning activities. Basically, they do a separate, they kind of do a separate lesson and make sure that they diversify the activities in the classroom. Now, next semester in 604, you're going to get deeper into that. Especially where you're going to see diversified lessons even for regular ed classrooms, where you try to do different levels of in your class. That's required now that we're doing inclusion model. This was opposed to the other thing here. So as we move through this, it gives you kind of the difference between them. And then it gets into some of the politics of it. Inclusion remains controversial. And it speaks to the research on both sides. There's advocates. And then some of the issues and it goes through, does federal law require inclusion? No, it says least restrictive environment. We know what that term means. And some folks argue that that's it. IDA, and it speaks to that, but it does speak again to least restrictive. And so this kind of is a primer for all of those things. Now, I'm not going to go through all 63 of these slides tonight, but you should take some time with this. So going forward, to kind of summarize tonight's presentation, understand that the Exceptional Children's Department in your district is in charge of once they're placed in EC services, something goes wrong, it falls back on them. prior to them actually being tested and placed into exceptional children's services or 504 services, you as the school principal are responsible to make sure that that intervention process and the 90-day federal process is in place and it's being followed to the letter of the law. That's on you. Understand that once kids are referred to the intervention team, they get the same protections as if they were already in the EC department. That mostly is FERPA and parents' rights. Again, those two civil rights documents. Once kids are in there, if you're either going to, your school district is going to either be doing a mainstreaming where they have regular special ed classes and get out every once in a while to go to a regular class, or you're going to have the inclusion model. And you need to know which it is. And if you'll look at this PowerPoint, it explains each of them thoroughly and contrasts and compares them thoroughly so that you'll know, because you may not be at the same place career-wise at the same school or the same district your whole career. This is one of those things you should put in your toolbox so that you'll know. Right now, I'm in a district that's doing mainstreaming. Here's all the characteristics of that. Or, I'm moving to a new school, they're doing inclusion. I better find out about what that means. This is the perfect document for that, because it compares and contrasts and gives you a complete explanation and all the arguments for both. And that's a good thing, because parents are going to ask you questions. Teachers are going to ask you questions. And if you'll review this, you'll know. So the question comes in here: is there a protocol for safety holes, breaking up fights? Yeah, you're supposed to be. What is it called, Emily? CTI? What is that name of that training that you're supposed to go to?
CPI.
CPI. There we go. CPI. There is a training that you have to. If you're going to do a restraint on a child, you are supposed to be CPI trained. Now, 1,000,000 to 1, I was in a school in Greensboro today with one of my interns. He's already had this class. He heard the same things that you're hearing. He said that there was a little kerfuffle at his school over he had to restrain an EC kid who attacked another kid in the cafeteria. And it wasn't that he did anything wrong or that he used bad tech. The problem was he hadn't been trained. He's just a regular ed teacher on lunchroom duty as part of his internship, and an EC kid attacked another kid. And so he used proper technique. There's going to be no fallout from it or whatever. But the folks at the building were like, we're concerned because you hadn't been CPI trained. And he was like, well, that's not my fault. I used the proper technique. I kept this large kid from killing this small kid. Well, we're happy about that, but but he said, well, I didn't have, once the big one jumped on the little one, I didn't have time to get CPI trained, which is a valid point, I thought. He's been around me too long. I told him, please remember, I'm already retired and got my pension. I can say things like that. You probably shouldn't. But he's exactly right. So, to Rory's question, if you're going to put yourself in harm's way, if you're going to be the person that's doing lunchroom duty or these kinds of things, it would be a good idea to get CPI trained, not so you just throw people around on a regular basis, but to kind of protect yourself, because you never know what's going to happen during one of these incidents. And so that would be a wise decision to do that. Now, there's also a place in state reporting if somebody uses inappropriate seclusion or restraint, and sometimes it becomes questionable. If you've been CPI trained, you'll probably get the benefit of the doubt. If you haven't, and somebody gets hurt, there may be an issue. And that has to be reported to the state. That doesn't go well. So here's a question from Michelle. This is a very good question. I may have to have Emily weigh in on this one as well. How, and thank you, Tracy, for typing in CPI. Tracy's our resident assistant principal, and she's on the ball. And I always love reading her answers to the questions since she's in the job. She kind of keeps me honest. How likely is it for students in the ninth grade to actually be given an IEP if they've been referred to services during elementary and middle school but did not qualify? It's highly likely, especially if it's behavioral in nature. It's usually it's kind of rare when a ninth grader qualifies for EC services because of academic difficulty, because that gap between performance and IQ usually stays about the same. And that's a lot of the basis for placing a kid academically. But what you will see is they'll get an IEP with behavioral goals in it in the ninth grade. As kids move through adolescence, sometimes that becomes an issue. So I would say fairly common for behavioral goals, not as common and much more rare for academic goals. Emily could probably speak to that. You know, there's a scale in terms of IQ versus performance that factors in getting placed for an academic IEP, and that usually doesn't change over time. So it would be rare for a kid, unless they had traumatic brain injury or some other problem. It would be rare for a kid to get an academic IEP in the ninth grade, but they certainly could get a behavioral one. Okay, make sure you know the CPI wording of the restraints to use in the report. That is what they look for. If the parent threatens a lawsuit, that's a good one from Jordan. Thank you, Jordan, for that. Again, the CPI training is not going to probably change much what you do, but you're gonna know how to respond by using the proper language, and you will know. You can say, I've been trained, and so yeah, that's a good idea to get the training. Okay, here's a good question from David. What's the minimum response? Only if the life's in threat. That you only have to respond if somebody's life's in danger, if you feel like their life's in danger. And that was what Kevin was talking about today in the school when I was with him. He said the kid that attacked another kid, you have disparities in size, especially in middle school, and everybody knows that. I saw something last night, and they were making fun of any of your football fans. You know who Andy Reid is. I think he's the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs now. They have video of him when he was a 14-year-old participating in punt, pass, and kick. And what they're making fun of is he was a giant. I mean, he was the biggest kid you've ever seen at 14. And the kid standing next to him, and said, here's the funny thing, the kid standing next to him is 14 as well. At that time, Andy was 6'5" and about 270 at 14 years old, and the kid standing next to him was probably 5 foot tall and weighed 90 pounds soaking wet. If the big one, and that was what Kevin was talking about today, the biggest kid in school, 6'3", weighs 240, jumped on a kid that was no more than 90 pounds. As he said, he was slamming his head into the concrete floor in the cafeteria. I mean, if you only have to respond. I would say a pregnant teacher would not be required to respond. But if you see that a child's life is in danger, the law says that you should attempt to intervene. But anything short of that, now some districts will put out, we don't want you intervening. We want you to, teachers, we want you to wait for security staff or police or whatever, or one of our trained people, our campus security associates or whatever. But if it's getting out of hand and it looks like one kid's going to get killed, you have a moral and a legal obligation if a kid's life's in danger. That's probably that's probably a little unclear, but it's even unclear when you go to court what your response should be. But if it's not one giant kid, pummeling another kid, um, you know, you have to use your discretion. But if the law says if their life is in danger, you're required to respond. We've had several middle school kids to qualify academically this year. Yeah, you will in middle school. As kids, that's a good point, Tracy. As kids hit puberty, early adolescence in middle school, you will see that IQ performance gap widen. So you will see a good many kids academically in middle school. It's just unusual to see that once they get to high school, once they're moving into later adolescence. That gap, you just can't show that gap academically. But yeah, you can in middle school. It's quite common. I was a middle school assistant principal in the 80s. And then again, then I had an elementary and a junior high, but then I had some middle school kids again. I had a junior high school in Charlotte, but we had 7th and 8th graders. So I didn't see as many of them, but when I had 6th graders, I saw a good many 6th graders that had not qualified previously. They did in the 6th grade. 6th grade was the big year that I saw in middle school. Not so much 7th and 8th, but 6th grade certainly saw a lot of 6th graders get placed on academic IEPs. Because that's the year that they, as my wife says, they get the box of hormones for Christmas. She taught 6th grade for the majority of her career. I suspect about 25 years. She taught 6th grade, and she said it was amazing to see the change after Christmas, that a lot of them just kind of went off the rails. And so, yeah, that's the big year. Kelly made a good point. When you see a lot of referrals in grades 7 to 12, it could be that they're just getting passed along the way, and letting it be somebody else's problem and not identified. Unfortunately, that happens, and that's why I pointed out those civil rights of parents. You're going to get in more trouble for inaction now than too much action. But you're right, because of all the process that you have to put a kid through, a lot of schools will just basically tell teachers, don't refer these kids. It's not going to do us any good anyway, and they'll just move them along. And then that's not the right thing to do. One of you responded this week about a kid that had been in trouble 4 times, and they were only giving that kid 1 day suspension. Basically what that means is they didn't want to have to do the manifestation determination, the functional behavior assessment, the psychological. They didn't want to get involved with all the paperwork. This was a kid that was already placed, but they didn't, talking about, he's already self-contained, but that might not have been his appropriate placement. He may have needed a more restricted environment than that school, and they knew that the parent would probably fight that, so they didn't want to bother with all that paperwork and the parent fight it. But that's not the right way to go about those things. But yes, you're right. A lot of times things don't get done because of the paperwork or the time or the effort that it takes along the way. But you got to do the right thing, and you don't want to get caught not doing the right thing. As an AP, I always intervene. That's correct. Now, Tracy made a good point there. Thank you, Tracy. Administrators, it doesn't matter how big or little you are, what's going on, your job is to intervene. Question was teachers. Teachers are legally protected, and they only have to respond if the life's in danger. Administrators, you gotta wait in there. I never will forget. I had an AP at a junior high. She was a young lady, and she wasn't real big, but she was tough as a Shawnee steak. And I never will forget, she tackled a big old kid. He was a big one. I don't know how it happened, but the next thing I knew, she was up on his back, and her dress was up around her neck. Thankfully for her, it was in the days before cell phones and cameras, or she'd have never lived that one down. But now she'd wade right in. She wasn't very big, but you wasn't going to run over her. She was tough. She was tough as nails. She was a good one. She had a good career too. She wade right in. That if that bothers you, the administration is not for you, because you are required to dive in. Uh, Worst whipping I ever took in my life was 2 ninth grade girls. I tried to break them up when I was an AP at the high school. Lord have mercy. They just stopped fighting one another and started beating on me. I had knuckle bumps all over me. You couldn't lay a dime on me anywhere I wouldn't hurt. They wore me out, but that's your job. That's part of it. I know that's kind of base and crass, and at the lower end, we want to be more intellectual in that. But we're charged with responsibility for these kids, and even if it's self-inflicted, we can't let them do these kinds of things. So yes, you have to dive in as an administrator. Teachers, they don't have that same level of responsibility. One of the things that I have done, and I'm not sure that this is the best policy, is I would let teachers volunteer to get trained on CPI. I had all the people, in your EC unit, all your EC people, and especially in self-contained units, behavior ones, and had all administrators trained. But sometimes I would open that up to teachers as well. But a lot of teachers didn't want that training, thinking that it would keep them out of cafeteria duty. No, you still got to pull your cafeteria duty or your bus duty or whatever. It would be better for you if you were CPI trained. Would help you legally protect yourself. But yes, I can assign you to those duties whether you're trained or not. It goes back to principal has the legal right to assign duties. Any duties assigned by the principal, teachers have to do those. Is it discriminatory not to put your small teachers on duty or in harm's way? I guess it probably is, but it's probably smart. You don't want to put them. I guess that's not modern thinking and the right thing to do. But I would sometimes hesitate to put my smallest, youngest people in harm's way where I knew that bad things were more likely to happen. That's just being intelligent. It may be discriminatory. It may be misogynistic or whatever. I hired a young lady one time. And I put her in the lowest grade that I had because of her size. She was a math teacher. She could teach 7th grade math as well as she could 9th grade math, but I just didn't feel like it was the right thing to put her with those 9th graders. Now, that may be old school thinking. That may insult some of you. If I do, I apologize. But sometimes as an administrator, you've got to kind of make some of those kind of calls. It's just common sense kind of things. I would like to be able to tell you that you can just, the teachers are interchangeable, that you can do whatever you want to with any of them, but that's not always the case. You need to be a little bit smarter about those kinds of things sometimes. If they come to you and say, I think I can do this, and we'll get you trained. I'm not opposed to giving you your opportunity to get your nose knocked over on the side of your face. You can go right ahead. I've had mine knocked over several times. But if you have people who don't want to do that, you can't, you can put them on duty, but don't expect them to go wading in. Unless it's a life and death situation, they're not required to go wading in as teachers. Administrators, you got to dive in. You got to go. Need to hit the gym, eat better, work out more, be ready. All right. I see my time is up. Questions you have for me tonight? If not, next week is week 10. Be working on your skip. Again, if you haven't submitted your OMA, drop it in Dr. Stedman's shell for your turned in check, and we'll get that moving right on to task stream. I monitor task stream every day. Those are getting moved along quickly. There's no more than a 2-day wait now to get things going through. I know D turned his in recently. D, how long do you have to wait more than a day?
No, sir. No, sir. Very quick turnaround, less than 24 hours, I think.
Yeah, I think it was. I monitor those. I think that's a big part of the process to keep things moving. And so I think stuff's getting graded in a very timely manner. I know Dr. Stedman checks his shell every night and every morning. Now, Dr. Stedman,
Lamb,
yes.
I want them to know that I realized that they had started, people had started, I cleared everything this afternoon that was in there. Now I've gone somewhere, I've just come back, but I will start looking at that more closely 2 and 3 times a day. So, and one of them, I failed to just, when I cleared it, I didn't say it's okay to go ahead and submit the task stream, but I will actually say that. I will check whatever they've done and turn it in. I will look at their work, and then you can look in there and you'll see that I've given you your grade or your assessment on that. Then I'll tell you it's ready for task stream. I would assume that, you know, at this point, Dr. Lamb has looked at it 100 times already anyway. So by the time you get it to me, it's a matter of me just kind of looking at it with another set of eyes, and you should be okay if you've been submitting to him things to him all along anyway.
Yeah.
And some of you have been submitting things to me to review all along as well. So I just want you to know I'm on top of it. And if for some reason you see that something's in there and I have not responded, it's okay to send me an email and say, Dr. Stedman, something's in there. I check it, but if I miss something, it's okay to let me know that.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Stedman. What I was getting ready to insult Dr. Stedman. I was going to say he's older than me. He doesn't stay up as late as I do, so you better get in there early. But he checks it regularly. And so, but again, the biggest reason that he's checking that is for the originality report. We don't want things going to the state that's going to show up as being copied. And usually it's just the only one that I've had a problem with so far this semester is one that they just didn't cite a reference from Penn State. And so as soon as we got the reference cited, they were good. Because it tells us exactly why it's too high. And so we can help you with that.
And Dr. Lamb, when they actually look at it, it will give them a report as well. Am I right? So it will tell you.
No, it won't.
Okay,
no,
okay.
Okay,
I didn't know that. Okay. Okay.
No,
If there is an error, if there's a problem, it will let me know and I will communicate with you.
He will communicate that with you. I do not have that function enabled for the students to get a report because they would have to pay then. They would have to have
okay, I got you.
Pay.
Okay.
We can do that for what the university pays for us to use, turn it in through our accounts, we can get the report. But if we turn on student reports, we'll have to add that to their bill, and it's quite expensive, by the way. And so there is a reason why we don't do that. This is a private company. It costs money, and we're trying to get in. And 99 times out of 100, you're not going to need that report. And you're going to be paying I think it's like $112 or something like that. It's quite expensive to get one of those accounts, and there's no need. All right. Anything else for the good of the group?
Dr. Lamb, not to single him out, but I need Jordan sometime. Send me an email and let me know when we can talk tomorrow. I need to help you figure out something on something I sent back some feedback on today. So let me know when we can talk sometime tomorrow.
That's fine. I saw it. I know what you're talking about.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah. Thank you,
Jordan. All right. Anything else for the good of the group? All right. I will see you all next week. Everybody work hard.